Welcome to the Are We Idiots Show, where we question the status quo on society's important issues while mixing in plenty of laughs along the way. Now, here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Are We Idiots Show. We are your hosts, as always, Mark Weaver and Richard Kroll.
Hey, Weave, it's always sunny in Philadelphia.
There's a show like that.
I heard.
Do you have a tip for our audience today?
Of course I do. I get so many requests through their website to please have these tips coming every week. So, folks, it's that time of year. Warmer weather is upon us. Spring has sprung, and summer's coming with 100-degree days in humid days in Philadelphia area.
What about our listeners in South America? You're not hitting them at the right spot.
They're
now.
warm all year round, so they could take this tip all year round. Folks, we're going to be having water ice and ice cream. Mark apparently is going to be having a lot of mint chocolate chip ice cream.
We learned that last episode.
Slurpees, all that kind of thing. And what typically happens to many people when you eat that stuff too fast?
You get a brain freeze.
You get a brain freeze, or otherwise known as an ice cream headache, and it's real, right? And the reason it happens is because the body's such an incredible computer. The roof of your mouth and nerves behind your nose signal an extreme temperature change, and they send signals to the brain to protect the brain, and arteries constrict, causing these migraine-like headaches. So, folks, when that happens...
I didn't know the biology behind it.
There's the biology. When this happens, immediately get the substance out of your mouth, right? Because that's causing that.
Do you propose spitting it out?
Spit it out wherever you are. People will understand. Number 2, place the tip of your tongue on the roof of your mouth to get it warm quicker.
Not to throw up.
Don't throw up. Number 3, cup your hands over your mouth and nose. Breathe out of your mouth into your nose. That'll also help warm the nasal cavity. And if by possible chance you're sitting next to a cup of coffee or hot tea, drink that immediately as well.
Or just wait 15 seconds and it goes away. Maybe
Those migraines are so painful.
I've never had that. Which, by the way, I forgot to mention, last show you said, did I ever have a calf, cramp? And I funny story, my buddy Jack Mullen had a calf cramp after flying overseas. We were on a golf trip. He woke up screaming in the middle of the night with his roommate, and for 15 minutes he couldn't get rid of the cramp, and the guy couldn't do anything for him. What's he going to do? Massage his roommate's leg?
A little weird,
but Jack claims to this day that he's ruptured his knees, he's broken bones. He said that was the worst pain he's ever experienced.
Oh, it's
I've never had that. I've had calf cramps, but I've never had that kind of pain. But
when you get a cramp, stretch it the opposite way it's cramping. That's another tip.
Is that really the truth? Yeah. Okay. All right, folks. On the show this week, we have our Idiot of the Week. Rich has some nominees for us. Then we're going to talk about the opioid epidemic, and that's a very serious subject, and you probably have heard a little bit about that, but we're going to talk a little more about that. And then we're going to highlight some of the worst epidemics in the history of the world. I'm going to see how knowledgeable Rich is about these. And before we go to Rich on the Idiot of the Week, just a reminder, go to our supporting listeners page of our website. We need patrons, don't we, Richie?
We do.
Come out and join the Are We Idiots bandwagon.
Every $10,000 helps.
So, Richie, lay it on me. Idiots of the Week.
So my first one... you can easily, we seem to have a lot in Florida lately, but if you just go out to Hollywood, we have an abundance of idiots out there, right? Now, a lot of it to me has to do with I'm okay with left-wingers, but ultra left-wing, free-thinking liberalists. Charlize Theron. Charlize Theron.
Very beautiful woman, by the way.
Okay, that's your opinion.
Yeah.
And many others, I assume, as well. She's raising 2 adopted children. Both, I thought, were male, as did she.
Uh-oh.
But this Oscar-winning actor, that's another thing, actor. What happened to actress and actor?
Well, actor's a generic term. It's
Yeah,
a
but-
non-gender.
Oh, there we go again.
Yeah.
You can't identify with any gender. I read. I'm like, no, she's an actress. She's not an actor, but okay, she's an actor. She now is raising her 7-year-old adopted boy Jackson.
What? You sure he's a boy?
As a girl.
Okay.
And she said, yes, I thought she was a boy too, until he looked at me when he was 3. So don't you just start to learn to really walk and talk at 3?
No, you're fully formed at that
You're
age.
apparently fully formed. And her 3-year-old boy said to her, I am not a boy.
Oh, boy.
So Theron said, there you go. I now have 2 beautiful daughters who, just like any parent, I want to protect and I want to see thrive. They were born who they are, and exactly where in the world both of them get to find themselves as they grow up and who they want to be is not for me to decide.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, there's been a backlash on both sides, right? You have transgender people saying, great job, way to go, thank you for your support. And then you have, and these are both African-American adopted kids. Most of the backlash is from African-Americans saying, what are you, an idiot? This always happens when white folks try to be holier than now,
What
adopting,
does that have to do with anything?
black kids. And they're saying, how do you let a 2 or 3-year-old determine what they are, and from that moment on, let them be that? Listen, I'm sensitive. If someone's homosexual, transgender, and you know that as an adult, say 16, 17, 18 years old, and that's the lifestyle change, I get it. A 3-year-old?
Yeah.
Now, I saw a photo. The kid's walking around, a boy with long braids in his hair, and she's putting him in a dress. I mean, what that's going to cause, as far as, to me, it's insane. But
So that's nominee number 1.
That's nominee number 1.
Charlize Theron.
Number 2, a boy's parents are furious after his teacher drew permanent magic marker on his head at Barry Miller Junior High in Pearland, Texas. Apparently, this incident stemmed from a design in the boy's hair. Now, I looked at it, and it's kind of a very close shave, but then there's like a little lightning bolt design on the side.
Cool.
Very subtle.
Yeah, I
pretty
like
cool. I mean, I see kids walking around with their hair dyed pink, blue, and whatever.
Yeah. Individual expression.
Yeah, this school has a policy against hair design, mohawks, mullets, and all that kind of stuff. And,
Is it a private school, I assume?
It just says Barry Miller Junior High. Doesn't sound like a private
It
school.
doesn't sound like it.
So the parents said Jules got a haircut on Tuesday with a little design in it. On Wednesday, the school assistant principal at Barry Miller told the kid he had 2 choices because he was out of the dress code. You can go to in-school detention or let me color in the design with a permanent black marker. The kid didn't know what to do. They didn't, they did not call the parents or let the kid. So he said, I don't want to go to detention. So the teacher colored it in with a permanent marker. It's still on his head 2 days later. They can't get it out with shampoo or soap. The teacher has apologized, but is now on administrative leave and facing discipline from the school district.
Of course, a permanent marker is truly not permanent. It will wash off. But what kind of stooge is this teacher? I mean, first of all, how old was the kid? Junior high? Why didn't you call the parents? Like the first thing is, hey, your kid's not in dress code. And I've had our kids been called back school we went to, and so our kids went to, and your daughter goes to. There was a certain length of skirt, and lots of times the skirt wasn't long enough because the kids grow, and so we got called and said, hey, you got to go bring them a bigger skirt. So, I mean, this happens all the time at schools with dress codes. I don't understand why. Just call the parent.
Seems
Ridiculous.
pretty obvious, right?
No, going to color their head.
We have school principal coloring in kid's head or Oscar-winning actor deciding that, okay, you want to be a girl and you're a boy at age 3, that's how I'm going to raise you.
Well, this is a hard one for me because I don't like people who abuse authority over a lot of other things. I don't respect hierarchies generally, and I don't respect authority much. So it's a real hot button for me. Anyone who has authority and abuses it is particularly egregious. Now, obviously, I've said on prior shows that this transgender movement and all this ignores biology, and I think that's the big, and again, the outliers are out there, and there's going to be some people that are born the wrong way and what have you, but more often than not, people want to ignore biology and not have any gender assigned. I think that's a crazy trend that we're in. So I'm going to give it to, even though they're both bad and both idiots, I'm going to give it to the idiot teacher, and I'll send $1.
Yeah, and you're right, because, when my daughter was 3, she said she didn't really want to go to preschool, and she didn't want to eat any vegetables or fruits because she didn't agree with killing plants. So we've raised her on an all-meat diet, and she homeschools herself.
And she just drinks butter.
She drinks butter milkshakes, and when she was 3, she knows best. So
So you don't agree with my selection then?
No, they're both. That's a tie for me.
All right, folks. So we're gonna try to make it a little bit lighthearted when we talk about opioids. It's going to be hard, I must admit, and that's from time to time we have shows like that. So if you've been living in a cave over the last several years, you would know that there is an opioid crisis going on. And let's first start with, in case you don't know, what is an opioid? So there's different classes of it, but essentially any drug containing opium. There's prescription drugs out there, Oxycontin, Vicodin, codeine, morphine, etc. There's synthetic opioids, which like fentanyl, which is getting a lot of play. And by the way, China is a big manufacturer of this synthetic opioid, fentanyl, which is extremely deadly. And then, of course, the old mainstay, heroin, which is the street version, so to speak, which has been illegal, but is everywhere essentially.
So legal and illegal.
Well, it's legal in prescription form, but it's also in its illegal street substance. So that's an opioid. And what is actually going on? So just to give you an idea, 2017, there were 70,000 drug overdoses in the U.S. 70,000. Wow. Actually, a little bit more than that. 68%, almost 48,000 people, died from opioids. So it's an absolute epidemic, and we'll talk about epidemics later on in the show. It's an epidemic. To give you some context, auto deaths, which were the leaders for many, many years of accidental deaths, are around 40,000. So it's almost double. Gun deaths, we've done the show on guns. A lot of people get exercised about gun rights and gun deaths and gun violence, for 39,000. And, I don't think this opioid epidemic has risen. Yes, there's stuff on the news, and 60 Minutes has done some exposés on it. But why is it, that's where I'll start, Richie, why is it that most people don't realize the epidemic that it is?
Great question. I don't know that I have the answer, because even locally, I've heard there's been some opioid problems at our local high schools.
Yeah.
Both public and private.
Right.
Kids even selling the stuff, or just kids getting addicted to it. Yet it's not an overwhelming headline in the newspapers or the news. And there must be some suppression, behind the scenes suppression mandate of the press or the media. And I'm not sure why, because if it's bigger than automobile deaths, if it's bigger than gun deaths,
right,
they're still getting
huge,
the majority of the press.
Yeah.
And it's all over the news. And so there must be something going on out of our control about this.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the people listening to this probably saying, "What do you mean it's not a big deal?" But, I know about the opioid epidemic, but I don't think people know the details behind it. So here's the manifestation of this epidemic. So in the U.S., life expectancy, we brought this up on last shows as we teased this episode, the life expectancy has been going up steadily for nearly 100 years because advances in medicine and healthcare. And so now I think men live approximately 77 years and women live on average 81 years. That's actually been going down for 3 consecutive years. We mentioned last show, the last time that happened was during World War I, where there was a tremendous amount of deaths going on, and there was an influenza pandemic in the U.S. So that's the last time, over 100 years ago, where 3 consecutive years the life expectancy dropped. That's what this is doing to our country. That is absolutely an epidemic. And on top of it, there's a suicide epidemic on top of the opioids. So it's a huge, huge problem. And I have a little background, Richie, unless you have some more comments. I have some
No,
little
I'm
background.
wondering, I'm thinking out loud, maybe there is a conspiracy theory here where, a lot of this stuff is legal drugs tied to big pharma
Absolutely.
and
Big money.
big money. And, on one level, the stuff works. On
Right.
the next level, it becomes an addiction and people are overdosing.
Right.
It's a fine line.
Right.
Right. So I'm wondering if there is some squashing by these big lobby groups or pharma companies. And because, yes, I didn't mean before that it's not a problem and we're not aware of it, but it's
not
just
proportional.
It's not proportional.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And that's why I thought we had to do a show on this. So let's take you back to where, again, this is summary level. There's lots of details in here. But essentially, and I'm going to bash government every chance I have.
I was waiting for
right?
it.
The FDA approved a lot of these opioid drugs, the Oxy, the Vicodin, those decades ago, without a full understanding of how addictive they were and how potentially lethal they are.
Sounds like cigarettes.
Exactly. And they just didn't understand how highly addictive they were and how dangerous they were. And what happened was this cabal of drug manufacturers, and I'll name them because they're public, and this is public information, and lots of exposés have been done on it, but Purdue Pharmaceutical, Janssen Pharmaceutical, Allergan, Mallinckrodt, AmerisourceBergen, which is local here, McKesson, Cardinal Health. There's others, but these are the drug manufacturers and distributors that had a highly profitable item, and they started pumping them out. And when people started to realize how addictive they were, these unethical doctors started setting up pain clinics. There's actually, if not too far from here, there's people that you see these signs, pain clinic. And maybe it says something about our society where we now will take anything to avoid any kind of pain. But what happened is, and again, I'm summarizing this very quickly. What happened is these unethical doctors started writing scripts for any kind of pain of life or back pain or whatever. And there's particularly bad situations all around the country, but there's really been hot spots. One is West Virginia. Listen to this, Richie. West Virginia, which I think is tied back, this could come into like a sociological experiment. West Virginia has had a bad economy. So when you have a bad economy and you lose some of your industry, people are off work, they get depressed, they look for outlets, right? In West Virginia, between 2007 and 2012, these drug manufacturers and distributors shipped 780 million oxycodone and hydrocodone pills
Holy cow.
into West Virginia. That's 433 for each man, woman, and child in West Virginia.
Mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling. It's and you saw on 60 Minutes and others, they had these exposés where there would just be lines of people coming to these pain clinics, and these doctors would just be writing scripts. They could care less, and people got hooked. And South Florida was another particular hotbed. There's lots of them around the country. But so what do you think about that run up to how we got here? And it's propagated all across the country. And it started with prescription pills, and we'll talk about where that has led in a moment.
Well, one thought, but first, a listener just texted me and said, "Could you please ask Mark what a cabal is?"
Yeah, cabal. It's like a cartel. It's a limited distribution, where they're controlling things, controlling the market like a cartel.
Thank you. Can you spell that?
No.
Okay. So I think one of the problems is
money.
Money's an obvious. greed, money and greed hand in hand. But I've noticed that these prescriptions are often written without any proof that, hey, doc, my knee's killing me, my back's killing me, my neck's killing me. Okay. And prescriptions are being written over the phone.
Right.
Without any proof that there's any real problem.
What happened to the Hippocratic Oath? Do no harm.
Are you calling me a hypocrite?
The Hippocratic Oath, Hippocrates, right?
Oh, Hippocrates.
Do no harm. I mean,
Well, that's what happened to our Constitution and the Ten Commandments. People don't necessarily follow them.
but don't you think that doctors? I mean, I'm assuming they're ethical, but they at this point they must know, or they should have known before. Why are they continuing to write this? Because they don't want to say tell the customer no? Is it as simple as that the customers insist on these and they say they're in pain and they want to take away their pain? Is it that innocent?
I don't think it's all malicious, but if you've been to a doctor's office lately, and this goes for almost 98% of them, you're sitting there for a half hour. I was in a doctor's office last year, who I no longer go to, 2-hour wait. I'm like, well, and they're just booking. They're overbooking. And, doctors are tremendous people, most of them. But, when you're overbooked, I guess that could be part of the problem. Then maybe their judgment and ethics are not on the up and up. But come in to see me. You got to see me. You got to see me.
They want to get you in and out.
You got to get in and out. And that just, I can write, you know what? Yeah, I know you have a bad knee, or, how'd you hurt your back? Okay. There's just time crunches, and they're trying to expedite and get as many people through the process as possible. And that's part of the problem.
And I think there's not enough care associated with just saying to someone, hey, you might be in pain for a while. Why do we, as a society, now feel like we're entitled to avoid all pain? This is 7 or 8 years ago now, maybe more than that. I got my Achilles fixed. I ruptured it. I had surgery. They gave me like 2 weeks worth of, I think it was Vicodin at the time. And I took one, and that was it. I mean, that's all I needed. But why would they give him 2 weeks worth? That's just the normal dosage. And I hear these stories all the time. My mom's had a hip replacement surgery. They gave her 30 days worth of, and my mom's like, I can't do that. I'm afraid of getting hooked. Now, these are rational people, right? They're doing this. But other people who aren't so inclined, they have 30 days when they only need 1 day or 2 days. I mean, don't you think the doctors are at fault there?
Well, either doctors or or insurance companies. There's minimums, maximums. There's so many non-check boxes with this process.
It's not really a controlled substance if you think of the way it's being distributed.
Well, it's legal, right? That's the other problem.
Yeah.
It's still legal, right? That's why I asked earlier, legal versus illegal. Once something's legal, I mean, I can walk into a liquor store and buy 15 cases of wine.
Right.
They don't know if it's for me or for a wedding.
Right.
I could,
or for underage kids.
For underage kids, for that matter.
Right.
If I can make a buck, what the heck. So once something's legal, it's not monitored. People are in a hurry, and everyone's in a hurry.
So should all drugs be legal? I'm going off script here, but it just brings up the question. So if these legal drugs are the root of the problem, and we'll talk about why it leads to heroin eventually, ultimately. But why are legal drugs given this pass, and illegal drugs are seen as a scourge on society? Many times they're the exact same components. In this case, opium. So why are legal drugs given a pass, and they're just as dangerous as we're talking about on the show as illegal drugs?
I'm happy to answer your question, but when I go off on a tangent, you call it a rat hole.
It was a rat hole.
When you do it, it's acceptable and normal.
I'm the big rat. I'm the big cheese rat.
Holy cow! You talk about hypocrisy. Great question. Why is alcohol legal and certain opioids legal, yet, marijuana is not legal, and they're proving, cannabis and cannabis oil have as many medicinal benefits as any other drug. So,
I mean, when you have illegal drugs, heroin obviously has been illegal forever. It's prevalent throughout society. All it's done is drive it underground. It's developed a a mafioso state or an underworld to support it. That's what happens. If you made things legal, all drugs legal, there would be taxation, there would be control. To me, I don't know why you have illegal drugs and legal drugs. It should all be the same. Anyhow,
Well, I
I
think-
went off on a tangent. I agree with you on that.
Yes, and I'm not calling it a rat hole, although it was, and I'm not getting annoyed with you. Anyway, great question. I just think
Have you ever thought about it, though?
well, yeah, bureaucracy, red tape. You have 5 billion substances, and if you do one, you got to do them all. Or it's so convoluted and complex, and if it involves the government, forget about it. Especially on such a wide-ranging, complex topic. I think it's a rat hole into itself.
All our libertarian audience members will like the fact that I brought up legalizing all drugs. So I got that in. All right. So what actually happens with an opioid addict? So what typically happens is they start with a small amount, and then they exhaust their prescription, and then they need more. Right? Your body it develops a tolerance to it. They need more. Their prescription runs out. The pills are fiercely expensive without the prescription. So what happens? They turn to the street version, which is heroin. And that's where a lot of this drives the heroin epidemic, because it's the same, essentially, class of drug. And when you get addicted to opioids, you don't sleep well. And a lot of people end up adding on additional drugs, mostly benzos, or I don't know the actual long name, whatever they are, benzos.
Why do you know the street lingo? That concerns me.
I do, actually. I printed out something that was kind of funny, which I won't go into now, but there's some street terms for you, Rich. Banging, which is slang for a procedure involved in the ejection of a solution containing heroin. Chasing the dragon, expression given to the pursuit of the original or ultimate but unattainable high. So you're chasing the dragon. I like that one. Dope, obviously, heroin. So tolerance, withdrawal. I know all the street verbiage. I'm a very hip guy.
You did just hurt your street cred by going back and reading the definitions.
I needed to, by the way. But so anyhow, here's what happens. The opioids are so pleasurable and they're so addictive that they just got to get more. Then their whole life revolves around trying to get more. Then they end up shooting heroin because that's all they can afford. Then they can't sleep, so then they start taking benzos, and both of these will suppress breathing. And a high percentage, 30 or 40% of all opioid overdoses result in them mixing the benzos and the opioids. And benzos are some of the street names. Some of the more common names are known as Valium, Xanax, Ativan. Those are all benzos. Ambien, another one. So a lot of people believe that
Rosanna Barr.
yeah,
Roseanne.
a lot of people believe that they're looking for this super intense high of both mixing opioids and benzos, and that's what's killing people. That is the high percentage of them are this mixing of. I think Tom Petty, Prince, some of them struggle with the same kind of thing in the last year. So it's a huge problem. Sorry. What do you think about that desperate spiral that people get in, and then we'll talk about what the results of that have been.
I can tell you it's real. I'm sure there are multiple listeners that know someone personally, or maybe even their own family, that's died of an opioid overdose. I know somebody had a kid overdose, so it's real. It's not just that happens to that person or this part of the country. No, it's everywhere.
In every socioeconomic group.
It does not discriminate from poor, middle class to affluent. It's everywhere because it could happen to anybody. Even look at some of the famous athletes like Brett Favre.
Right.
Legitimate pain, broken bones,
right.
tendons. So you start mixing opioids with alcohol. Next thing you know, you're addicted.
Right.
And the person wasn't before they started this process.
Right.
So it is real. It's dangerous. And again, it's concerning because it's not getting the proportionate publicity for the impact it's had on today's world.
So how can society / government / individual families. How do you think? What do you think the answer? Maybe not individual families because that's too hard because there's too many circumstantial differences there. But as a society, what do we need to do to prioritize this? I'm putting you in charge of public policy, Richie. What do you think we need to do? What could help to try to solve this?
Well, what I'm going to say might be unrealistic to what actually can happen, but natural cures, right? So, which leads to maybe my next episode, I can report on my inflammation-reducing cocktail, if it really works or not. But I think the problem is once there's a true epidemic, you have to eliminate some of these things and find other ways. Now, pain, everyone's got pain. I got a bad back, you got your issues, shoulders, whatever. One, what's your tolerance for pain? The minute you have a hangnail, do you run out and throw down a bottle of pills, or do you realize it's temporary? If you have pain so bad that it impacts your daily duties,
right?
You got to do something about it. But there's got to be other ways. There's all sorts of. There's opioids. There's NSAIDs. There's aspirin. There's certain natural ibuprofen. There, turmeric. Cinnamon, ginger. There's other. I think there really needs to be education and more data on natural cures that don't cause any addiction. And if they work, now you're going to fight Big Pharma and the FDA and the money and the greed part of it. But that's where I would start.
Right. Well, so this is probably going to go off on a little bit of another tangent.
Here we go.
But, in my mind, these drug manufacturers should not have a exclusive for whatever it is, 17 years from patent. I don't even think patents should be rewarded. I think if you need to compete in an open market, you shouldn't have patent protection. So I think one thing that would solve all this is remove some of the money incentives and this cartel around the drug manufacturers. That's one. Two, education. I agree. Like a lot of other subjects we talked about on this show, I unfortunately think that most people are not educated in the subject matter, and in this case, the highly addictive nature of these drugs. And I don't think doctors have done a good job. I don't think family members have done a good job. Same thing, I had a conversation with my mom. She's like, I know I can't do this because it's going to potentially get me addicted. And if you understand the potential consequences, a spiraling life out of control, and heroin and some of these opioids, you can be addicted within the first couple tries. I mean, it's highly, highly addictive. So why would you even go there? I mean, I would have to endure a huge amount of pain before I'd even try that. So, I mean, those are the two main things that I would say. The next thing I would say is that the doctors that prescribe it, because at the end of the day, that's what's getting to the consumers. It has to be legally prescribed by the doctors. And again, I understand they can probably get it elsewhere on the street. But if it's starting from these pills in large part that's essentially free as part of your medical plan, there has to be a higher bar put in place to prescribe these. I mean, I don't know if there's some criteria of pain or some kind of, assigning a certain type of procedure that warrants 5 pills and a certain type of procedure that's 6 pills. I think there has to be some gates put up to do that. And I'm not a big believer in government regulation, but because the government has set up this cartel, they need to be involved in deconstructing it.
Yeah, we talk about sensitive topics that are really, really difficult to figure out, especially in a short show. But I know a lot of doctors, and I would say all of them, at least the majority of them, are ethical people of high character, and they're not just going to do something without knowing what the potential risks are for their patients.
But do they have the time to, like you brought up earlier, do they have the time to really dig down and follow up with people? And this goes back to our health insurance show, but the whole healthcare system is so screwed up. I don't think they have the time to get involved.
They don't, for the most part. But, if they've known somebody for 5, 10, 15, 20 years and hey, Rich, you really got that level of pain? I'll give you something, but if it's happening with somebody they barely know or they just met or a new patient, that's a problem.
Do you think the doctors should be held accountable, civilly or criminally even? if people, get too much and get. I mean, that's a big step. But
how do you enforce that though? But I do like your idea of. All right, this is the situation. You have a broken ankle. Oh, this is the situation. You have a ruptured disc in your back. Oh, this is the situation. There should be this gets 1 pill, this gets 3, this gets 5, with a maximum
right,
that ends.
right,
And then reevaluate.
right.
So part of it's a timing issue, but I never like feeling rushed in doctor's offices or waiting too long. So I don't know what the answer is, but a lot of it is time and taking the time, personal care. A lot of it has to do with what's legal. Hey, it's legal. It's not
Right.
it's not my fault. It's not my
Exactly
problem.
right. I think that's a huge part of it is the assumption that something is legal, and this is what we go back to why drugs are legal or not legal, and the bifurcation of that. I don't understand that because these are potent drugs. So, final comments before we move on to some epidemics from history.
Yeah, I think also, listen, I'm not a pot smoker. I could care less about pot. I never was. But, if it's not being used for pure recreational use before you go out and drive a car or operate a machinery, there's a lot of proof now, cannabis or cannabinoid or whatever oil relieves a lot of these same symptoms these opioids take care of without any apparent side effects or addiction. And yet, we're halfway there. What, half the states, whatever.
Right.
So I think there are other alternatives, including natural spices and natural foods. But I think this pot one, this cannabis, marijuana, it will really help the problem.
It's a good test case for potentially other more serious drugs, I guess.
Absolutely.
All right. So my closing comments is obviously we've been blessed not to have family, deal with this, but there are a lot of families dealing with this. So there is a helpline if you know someone that's in your family that's addicted or a friend that's addicted. It's 1-800-662-4357. Again, 1-800-662-4357. That's part of Health and Human Services organization. It's a Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration. That's part of HHS. So I pray that none of you know anyone like that, but chances are, if you believe the statistics, you may, if you don't now. So go and seek help. There's lots of programs out there to get help, and there is a light on the other side of this dark tunnel. All right, Richie, we're going to highlight some epidemics in history. You're a pretty good history buff. So if you had to guess, what would be the worst epidemic? An epidemic would be killing a lot of people in the history of humans.
The Black Plague.
That is actually second.
Oh, I hate to come in second.
There was the Plague of Justinian. The Plague of Justinian hit humanity between 541 and 542 AD, so only about a year. It's held responsible for the highest number of lives lost in any epidemic in history, believed to be approximately 100 million people.
Really?
Yeah, which was at the time about half the world's population. This plague was able to spread so quickly because it carried on the backs of rodents whose fleas were infected with bacteria. These rats traveled all over the world on trading ships and helped spread the infection from China to northern Africa and all over the Mediterranean. This plague was attributed for weakening the Byzantine Empire in several ways. They lost military power, no longer able to fend off intruders. Farmers became sick. Agricultural production declined. And with the smaller agricultural base, income taxes declined. Basically, it killed a whole empire, where the Byzantine Empire was the largest at that time. The Black Plague. Do you know any details of that, Richie? Do you know any of the history of the Black Plague? Since you brought it up?
But I will let you run them off.
Okay. So the Black Plague claimed about 50 million lives from 1346 to 1350, so about 4 years. Again, this is another one that the outbreak started in Asia and was carried by rats and infected fleas. So I guess my answer is, why don't we just kill all the rats and the fleas in this world? Wouldn't that be an answer? After its arrival in Europe and spread death and destruction, Europe lost 60% of the population. And symptoms began with swelling of the lymph nodes in the groin, armpit, or neck. After 6 to 10 days of infection and sickness, 80% of the people died. It just goes to show you, we worry about a lot of things, but this is another thing we don't talk a lot about on this show or in society is the dangers of pandemics and epidemics of a viral nature. I mean,
There's a lot of movies about this stuff.
I know, but when you think about all the things to worry about, we worry about nuclear war. We worry about a lot of things, starvation. We worry about water supply in the world. We worry about the ozone layer. We've had shows on this. How many people talk about a pandemic or an epidemic wiping out tens of millions of people, which, at least according to history, is a lot more things we should worry about.
Chemical warfare.
Yeah.
They're talking about putting one of these
agents
right, and spreading it, across certain parts of the world. There's been a lot of outbreaks lately of, I think we mentioned this on another show, but due to Jenny McCarthy and a lot of the
measles
BS,
thing,
about vaccines causing autism, and a lot of people then didn't immunize their children.
Right.
There's new outbreaks of mumps, measles, things that have been eradicated for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I think this is just a big a risk as any of the other stuff like nuclear war or terrorism or aliens or whatever.
And I don't have a very good hard science background or a biology background.
You are clearly a soft science
But
gentleman.
it is scary how dangerous some of these, a biological outbreak could be. I just haven't given a lot of thought
Well, there
to
was
it.
just even the hospital, the NICU or the prenatal, something broke out and 8 babies died from meningitis or the staph
scary.
infection. Yeah, it is scary.
All right, a few other quick ones. The HIV/AIDS epidemic, which it started in the late 60s, but it really exploded in the 80s. And largely it's been contained, but it's still going on today. In sub-Saharan Africa, there's still a lot of people dying from AIDS. And in that case, we actually have the technology to eradicate it, but we don't have the education or the distribution to eradicate it. It's still going on today.
Patient Zero, a Swedish male stewardess, airplane steward, brought it over
Right.
to the U.S.
40 million people have died in the AIDS epidemic. So that's kind of like the third one. There's a few other ones. The 1918 flu, 20 million people died. That's the one I referenced earlier during World War I. 20 million people died. I mean, can you imagine something that, big news today is an airline crash or a shooting or something like that where 100 people, 200 people die? 20 million people. That's mind-boggling to me. The modern plague, which was 1894, there's 10 million people died. The Asian flu, 1957 and 58, 2 million people died. The Hong Kong flu, 1968 through 69, 1 million people died. Russian flu, cholera epidemic. I mean, there's been a bunch of them, but I think that the takeaway is that this is something that we need to pay more attention to. I know the CDC has all preparedness. It's what's that show? The Walking Dead. There was some kind of basis out of the CDC or what have you. But I don't think much about it. Maybe I'm just ill-informed and ignorant on these matters, but It seems kind of scary how dangerous these are. And beware, folks. There are epidemics that could happen. It's possible. Closing thoughts there, Richie.
I just wrapped an entire cellophane wrapping around my head and genitals.
So you're safe for today, at least, in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania.
You scared me.
All right, folks. Well, make sure you listen to our next episode. And we took a little different tact. I think if you're alive in this country, you've heard that the Mueller report was issued a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago as we taped this. And we're going to hold off until our next episode to talk about the Mueller report. We wanted to see if there's any kind of post-Mueller report release follow-ups. We wanted to give it a couple of weeks because everyone came out with their initial impressions, and it's very polarizing, as you might imagine. But hopefully by the time we get into our next episode, a couple of weeks out, because I have some vacation coming up.
Again.
Yeah, again. We'll have some better insights on the Mueller report and probably some fireworks because, as you all know, I'm not a big Trump fan.
Is it Mueller or Mueller?
I said Mueller, but who knows? Bueller, Mueller. All right. As always, please remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See y'all next episode. Take care.
Thank you for listening. Please download, subscribe, share, and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and also our website.